case is brutal. It's just brutal and it's senseless. And 2 people lost their lives on October 18th and 19th of 2016. And the defendant was absolutely a willing and able participant in the chain of events, beginning when Reginald Gant shows up with Anton's body in Maria's car. He is in for a penny, in for a pound, all the way through after. We are at a point where you have all the evidence in the case. We're going to talk about it. It comes in piecemeal. We talked about that in opening statement. It comes in bits and pieces. And it's tough sometimes to put things together as it comes into evidence. So over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to put some things together that came in pieces at trial. We're going to go through a timeline, and we're going to talk about how we know the defendant was responsible for participating in disposing of Anton's body in a brutal and degrading way, and how he's responsible for killing Jamie Klein brutally in her home. I'm not going to show autopsy pictures, you guys saw them, but the number of injuries to her is catastrophic. And this happened while her 5-year-old daughter was blessedly asleep, probably in her bedroom 40, 50 feet away. So we're going to start with the law. That kind of frames our discussion this morning. This is not a case that rises and falls on a legal technicality. You know, make sure you read the instructions. You've heard them a couple of times now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Count 1, the defendant, while acting in concert with other individuals, knowingly or intentionally killed Jamie Klein. Count 2 is a little bit wordier. There is a difference in the time frame on count 1 and count 2, the way it's charged, but it's not a significant legal difference. Count 1 is charged honor between the 18th and the 19th. Count 2 just reads honor about the 18th. But if you find that some of the defendant's actions with respect to count 3 happened in the early morning hours of the 19th, that's what that honor about language means. So no legal distinction there. So count 3, the defendant with the intent to hinder the apprehension or punishment of Reginald Gant harbored, concealed, or otherwise assisted Reginald Gant after Reginald Gant had committed a murder. That's assisting a criminal. There's a meme, or I don't know if that's the right word for it, but you know, who do you call to bury a dead body? Who's your close person that metaphorically you would trust with a situation like that? Reginald Gant was faced with that real world situation, and who did he call? Logically, he called his brother. The defendant enlisted his brother to assist him in the events from that point forward, and their other brother, Christopher Robinson, as well. Acting in concert, that's accomplice liability. That's the next couple of instructions here. For example, with Jamie Klein, you saw the knife sticking out of her side. You heard from Dr. Wagner, lots and lots of stab and incised wounds. Not all of them were fatal. We do not have to prove whose hand the knife was in when the fatal injury occurred to Jamie Klein. That's accomplice liability. If you intentionally aid, induce, or cause another person to commit an offense, you commit that offense. We talked about that in jury selection. It's common sense. In for a penny, in for a pound. All for one, one for all. That's the concept here. And we don't have to prove that the defendant is the person who inflicted the fatal blow. If he held Jamie Klein so that Reginald Gant could more easily kill her, he's guilty. If he stabbed her but didn't inflict the one to the neck or the one that pierced her lungs, he's still guilty because he actively participated in her killing. That's accomplice liability. And it doesn't matter what happened to the other people. Somebody asked a jury question about where's Chris, what's going on with that guy. Doesn't matter. We're here for him. Guy right here in the blue suit. That's what we're focused on today. We heard about Bria, we heard about Reginald, we heard about Christopher, but your determination today, your factual finding with respect to these charges relates to him and him alone. Here are the things you can consider. Is he at the scene of the crime? Was he with other people who were engaged in the criminal activity? Did he fail to oppose it? And what did he do before, during, and after? And we'll look at that next with respect to the timeline in this case. So that's accomplice liability. I wanted to spend a moment on that because that's part of the charge, and it's common sense, but legally there's a lot of words associated with it. We don't have to prove motive. There are a couple of motives that were presented during the course of the trial as to Jamie Klein's death, and one was that they mistakenly thought that she was the one who dropped Anton off close to Poinsett that night. It turned out it was Rachel Buell, but they thought that she would have known where Anton was last, and the second motive is that they thought there was something valuable over at her house, or that she would have been a witness. It doesn't matter, any of those things. There's no reason for it. We don't know what was in their hearts and in their minds at the time they did what they did. We just have to prove what they did. There are multiple sources of evidence in this case. We have physical evidence that was located at the scene, at the multiple scenes. We have Priya Witt. We'll talk about her. We heard a lot from her. And Juwan Follins. We heard a lot from him as well. So let's go through the timeline. Again, putting things together that come in piecemeal through the trial. And as we do this, keep in mind that a lot of these things build on each other. There are a lot of pieces of evidence that come in independently of the rest of the evidence. For example, the DNA is developed independent of any witness testimony. The scene at Hartsel Road is processed independently of what anybody said. Juwan comes in independently of Priya. So all of this evidence, you look at how it fits together. You don't pick it apart, you put it together. Prior to October 18th, 2016, what sets the stage here? Priya Witt was living with the defendant and his brother, Reginald Gant, between Bowser and Poinsett. She was staying with them, and she testified that really she was in a tough time in her life. The only thing she owned, ironically in this case, that she was kind of proud of was that car. That's about all she had left, that and her kids. Gregory Robinson, Christopher Robinson, and Reginald Gant are brothers. That came in during trial, but it's a huge fact, the connection between these guys. Again, who do you call? Who do you trust to enlist in a criminal enterprise? The fact that these guys are related to each other, close, live together, is significant. Anton Moore had known the family, known these guys, particularly Mr. Gant, for years, and was outwardly to all people who didn't know kind of what was going on behind the scenes under the hood during that period of time, he was close to Reginald. Anton Moore and Reginald Gant were business associates. We heard about that. The only relevance of that narcotics activity to this case is it forms a connection between these guys and it contributes to the motive. There aren't charges associated with it here, but it's relevant for motive. And we heard from Sergeant Tinkle a couple of days ago that Mr. Gant and Mr. Moore were actively under investigation. Mr. Gant's home had been raided very recently, and Mr. Gant had snitched on Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore probably didn't know he was suspecting that. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it puts these guys almost in a kill-or-be-killed situation. And Mr. Gant decided to take it into his own hands, control the narrative, and later accuse Mr. Moore of snitching on him, even though he was the one who snitched. October 18th, 2016, what do we know about Anton's movements during the course of the day? Well, he was worried about Reginald. He told Jamitha that he was worried that Reginald would set him up. And she said he meant that in a couple ways. Number one, to be arrested, and number two, to be killed. So Anton's no dummy. He knows that something's off. There's a disturbance between these two guys. The hair on his arms is standing up, metaphorically here. Anton visits Rachel Buell and her children for dinner. He confides in her. He says, hey, do you think I can still trust Reggie? He's worried about Reggie. He's kind of chewing on what's going on between those two guys during this period of time. Rachel gave Anton a ride after dinner to the area of Poinsett. She dropped him off, and this ties into why they ended up going to Hartsel, why they thought Jamie might have been the one to drop him off. She said she dropped him off in the area. She didn't walk into the door. Nobody saw her car, or she didn't make contact with anybody at Poinsett. She just drops Anton off. And she says that was in the evening hours after dinner, after dark. Sadly, it's getting dark earlier in the day. We're about 3 weeks from October 18th at this point. We saw the locations. There's Poinsett Drive. That's where it's kind of the hub of the activity in this case. That's where all these guys come and go from. Jamie Klein's day, Dwayne Tomlinson visited in the afternoon hours, helped prepare dinner, and he said he was gone by the time Alexis got home from school. He went back to where he was living in, I think it's Warsaw, with his girlfriend. And he said it was a pretty routine communication between the two. No big deal. Jamie seemed fine, and when he left, he thought everything was okay. You heard from Misty Yates very briefly on, I don't remember, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning. She said she's the last person that talked to Jamie. And the way this came about is law enforcement got Jamie's phone records. And they started running those numbers back and trying to figure out who she had talked to close in time to her death. And Misty was the last person that she communicated with. That call started at 9:56. Misty said they talked for what seemed like a couple hours. Everything seemed fine. And Jamie was expecting Anton to come over later when they ended that call. So that's what we know about what was going on with Anton and Jamie. And the bottom line of all this is neither one of them expected what happened to them that night. They had an expectation that they would finish their evening. They'd wake up the next morning. Anton asked Rachel to take care of his dogs. It was going to be just a normal day. The next morning they'd get up and do what they always do. Jamie was going to get up, get Alexis ready for school, get her out the door, and go about her day. And sadly, neither of those things happened. Sometime between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, and this came in through Detective Sept. We didn't hear from Larry Jones, but we're able to reconstruct this through phone records and his investigative interview with Larry Jones. Anton Moore talks to Larry Jones by phone at 9:30. Larry says he met with Anton within about an hour of that call at the strip club to talk about money that he was owed. Keep in mind, Larry Jones isn't connected to anybody in this case. And this is one of those great examples of how the evidence builds on each other and comes in from independent directions. Because, keep in mind, we'll get to this in a moment, Priya says, I took Anton to the strip club. He got out of the car, he met with somebody in the parking lot for about 10 minutes, he got back in the car and they left. So Larry Jones says they have this quick transaction in the parking lot. Priya Witt drives Reginald Gant and Anton Moore to the club, close to the Poinsett Drive home. Anton speaks to a person in a vehicle for a short time. Priya says she and Reggie made kind of small talk while Anton was out of the car, and they return to her car. Or he returns to her car, Anton does. And we know that Reginald Gant phone, we don't have a lot of phone evidence in this case, but his phone pings off a cell tower close to these locations. Again, corroboration, the evidence comes from multiple different directions, and it builds on itself. And you can't take any of this for granted. This is a big deal. It puts him in the area of Poinsett, it puts him in the area of the strip club around the time that Priya Witt and others put him there as well, that Larry Jones puts him there. This is all corroboration, it's all building. We have the club on Goshen Road, and we have the cell tower on Cass Street. That's where Reggie's phone was pinging during that period of time. Between 9:30 and 11, again, we don't know exactly what time this is. This is Anton's death. Gant tells Priya to run the block. Gant shoots Anton twice in the back of the head. Gant tells Priya to return to Poinsett. The defendant, Mr. Gant, and Christopher move Anton's body to the garage. This is the crossroads for him. This is the moment, right? When Reggie Gant walks up to the house and knocks on the window, and the defendant comes out, and there's a dead body in the passenger seat of that car, and there's blood and matter and whatever else all over that car, he's got choices. He can say, get that stuff the heck out of here. But he opens the door, and he walks out, and from that point forward, he's guilty of every charge that he's facing in this case. Because he helps move Anton from the car to, they start trying to put it in the trunk. Ultimately, they put it in the garage at Poinsett. These are the only, I show this one because it's important. We have two shots to the back of Anton's head. And you heard from Dr. Wagner that the wound tracks are different. And keep in mind what Priya says here. She says he shot Anton once. And then there's a short period of time Anton is still moving. He's jerking, I think is the word that she used. He's moving around. And that's when Reginald shoots him a second time. And what do we see? This first injury at the base of his skull is just basically straight back to front, almost straight through his head. The second injury is a different angle. It's back to front, but it's also angled right to left. And so again, you look at this evidence, you think Priya knew what Dr. Wagner was going to find during his autopsy? You think she picked through that when she said he was shot at 2 different times? The only explanation for this is that either the gun had moved in relation to Anton's head or his head had moved in relation to the gun. You know, you can pull a trigger on a semi-automatic weapon. Stacey Hartman told you as quick as you can pull that trigger. Those 2 shots could have come almost immediately. They would have had the same wound track. Instead, they're at different angles as they enter his head, and that's why the wounds look different as well. The defendant, Priya, Christopher, and Gant, the defendant is in the car at this point. Again, all these crossroads, think of them as crossroads. I can either go this way and get the heck out of this situation, or I can just keep helping. And he keeps getting in the car. He keeps going in the house. He keeps grabbing knives. They force her to drive to 1024 Hartsel Road. She says Gant had a gun on her during this period of time. The defendant and Gant killed Jamie brutally by stabbing her to death in her kitchen. And then the group returns to Poinsett Drive. You know, Hartsel Road is here out towards New Haven. And let's look at the scene a little bit. There are a couple things here that are significant. The futon in the couch area is trashed, things are moved, pillows are cut or torn open. They're looking for something. And when you move to the kitchen area, we're going to look at a couple of things closely here. Because keep in mind, the account from Priya is that there were, I think she said, 2 knives used, 2 people stabbed Jamie. So does the scene support that? There's the butcher's block. There's a knife missing from the front row, the second from the left, and there's at least 1 knife missing from the top row. There should be more knives in this butcher's block. So let's look around the kitchen. And this house is fairly neat. Jamie kept a fairly clean house. There's not stuff strewn everywhere. And you know that Sergeant Dolby with the Indiana State Police was looking for knives. They found one in Jamie. If there were knives out of place in this house, he was going to grab them. There's the sink. No knives with black handles in the sink. There's the dish strainer. No knives with black handles in the dish strainer. And there's that open drawer. And it's not a top-down picture, but you can see well enough to see that there are no knives with black handles in the drawer. So when you back up to the kitchen perspective shot here, and then you move forward to, sadly, we know where one of those knives was located. There's at least 1 unaccounted for knife from this house. Possibly 2. And we heard that there's a creek and a bridge right next to the house. They threw some items over that bridge 8 years ago. But there is a knife unaccounted for from this kitchen. Again, that is hugely significant corroboration of Priya, and it's also on its own instructive as to how Jamie died. We move forward in our timeline. October 19th, 2016, Gant, the defendant, and Christopher load Anton's body into the trunk of Priya's car. Gant, Christopher, and Priya drive to the 6600 block of Fairfield, throw Anton's body into a ditch where it is later found. And then they return again to Poinsett. That's the hub of activity. That's where everybody keeps coming back to. And Priya goes to work. And she told you what her state of mind was at that point. They told her, act normal, do the things you would ordinarily do this day. She's scheduled to go to work, so she went to work. She got there, it was dark. Her shift started somewhere around 8 o'clock. And again, that's where Anton's body was disposed of. 8:18 a.m., these bodies were discovered within about 3 minutes of each other. Gabriel finds Alexis walking down the road. You heard about all that. You saw the emotion associated with Alexis. That's the kind of thing that sticks with the people in this case. But fortunately, she was unharmed. He goes into the house and discovers Jane. Jason Lee calls 911 3 minutes later at 8:21. He's walking his dog and finds Anton's body where they came to rest. Talk about Alexis here in a moment. She was in the house. We had to talk about her because, you know, if we didn't, you guys would have been wondering if she knew anything about what happened. And so she's interviewed twice. We heard from her dad, who's periodically kind of asked her if she has any questions about this. You know, were you wondering about anything? And fortunately, it seems like she never came out of the room. She just doesn't know anything other than she found her mom the next morning. October 19th, 2016, Priya leaves work early. She said she came out, obviously she's upset. She hadn't slept in 2 days, and she comes out to her car and realizes it's a mess. There's blood. It's the first time she'd seen it in daylight. She, the defendant, and Gant try to clean her car up. It goes horribly, in her word. Just too much in there. And again, this is the next day. This is hours after the killings. And this is another crossroads for him, right? But he continues to participate in everything that's going on in this case. Gant finally tells her to leave the car and, quote, they'll figure something out. And we know what they figured out later. October 19th, Priya contacts Juwan, meets him at what he refers to as the big house. That's kind of where he and his family would hang out. Juwan notices that the headrests are missing from her car. There was some confusion about that. It didn't come in super clean. But eventually, I think maybe in response to one of your questions, he clarified that and said, no. She didn't tell me the headrests were missing. I saw it with my own eyes. I'd seen the cars 2 days before. I kind of know cars. I work on cars. The headrests were there 2 days before. But when they came over that morning, they were missing. Again, little bits and pieces here, right? Why did they take the headrest out of the car? Anton was probably up against that headrest when that first shot was fired, or came in just under the headrest. Regardless, it makes sense that there would have been material on those headrests, so they disposed of it. Priya tells him what happened the night before. Both of them talked about that. He said she was devastated, emotional, and scared. Unfortunately, there are hearsay rules that preclude us from asking him for a narrative. Tell us everything Priya says. You can't do that. But he did give some details. He says she gave details. She talked about going to New Haven, seeing a woman stabbed to death, and there was a child in the home at the time. Priya told Juwan she was held at gunpoint, and she named the defendant and Gant during that first conversation as being involved. Pause here for just a second. Out of this group, Gant's pointing a gun at Priya during most of the incident, according to her. She scared him, and she had just seen him kill Anton in the car. In her mind, she had a relationship with him. And he's the only one who was even halfway nice to her during this string of events. He called her to check on her as they were dumping the body. Remember, she's in the car, and the other guys are dumping the body down the ravine or the creek or whatever. And he calls her to check on her. If there's anybody in this group that she has a motive to minimize their activity or protect a little bit, it's him. But she doesn't. Priya left Juwan's, returned 30 minutes later with the defendant, and this is the first threat to Juwan from the defendant. It's a threat, but it's also an admission by him to another person. I know she told you what happened. You better not tell nobody, because the same thing will happen to you. That's what the defendant said face-to-face to Juwan on October 19th. later, and this time frame is a little bit unclear, but he was with Priya when the defendant called. She told him it was the defendant, and Juwan believed him. It was kind of a nice moment for him. Somebody confronted him. Well, how do you know it was him on the phone? Do you really, really know it was him on the phone? He says, I guess I can't say 100% sure it was him, but Priya said it was him. She was talking to him like it was him, and I certainly believed it was him. And then the content of what the defendant said is obviously pretty clear too. I know you know what the F happened. You know we killed Anton, so if you say something, we will kill you too. So on 2 separate occasions, the defendant essentially admits to Juwan that he participated, and in his mind, that's the defendant's state of mind, we killed Anton. So that's his words that he was an active participant in this. So he knows what he did. October 19th, again, the defendant caused Priya to drive him to Chicago in somebody's black car. There was evidence that Christopher had a black Charger, unclear if that's the car or not. October 20th, between 4 and 5 in the morning, we get the vehicle fire at 2445 Fairfield Avenue. Priya is notified of this as she's on her way back from Chicago. She had taken Gant and the defendant to Chicago, so Christopher's still here in Fort Wayne. You do the math as to who's responsible for the car fire. That's certainly the most likely person to have done this. But again, you can't minimize this. It's part of the case, but it's also huge corroboration of this chain of events. It's Priya's car that was set on fire. Priya didn't do it. Somebody else set the car on fire. And that's a running theme through this too. One person could not have done any of this, let alone all of this. So you know there are multiple people involved, and the headrests obviously are missing in this image. Somebody got rid of those and disposed of them separately. And that vehicle is located in the 2400 block of Fairfield. October 21st, November 17th, I think there was some contact in March of 2016 as well. Detectives talked to Priya, they collected DNA. She's not forthcoming. Keep in mind, she testified that she lived with the defendant's mother for about a year after this. She had nowhere else to go. And we heard that her lifestyle, her drinking accelerated after this incident. We heard from Juwan that he was very concerned about that. January 17th, New Haven Police Department is notified of a possible CODIS hit on some of the DNA swabs to Reginald Gant. Kruger obtains a search warrant for Gant's DNA. May 3rd, 2017, Gant is located finally, and he's swabbed for DNA. His DNA is consistent with 3 swabs that were collected on parts of the road. The first one is on this patio area outside. Would have been great if there had been DNA on the other mitt, but I think we now know that the DNA isn't like it is on CSI, right? We swabbed everywhere on Priya's car, tons of swabs, and it's tedious to go through that with the analyst, but lots of swabs. It's her car. She's in and out of that thing all the time. Her DNA was nowhere to be found. So DNA is not perfect. It's fragile. But despite all that, we did find Reginald Gant's DNA in 3 places, and we suspect that he cut himself during the course of the incident. The first one is on this patio. The second one is on the tile area. Over in this area, these blood droplets here, as crime scene technician Dolby said, the ones that are a little bit out of place, there's a pool of blood around Jamie, but there's some droplets elsewhere that were consistent with Reginald Gant. And the third one, again, in the area of the tile floor. 8 trillion, that's the highest number they will report. It's DNA consistent with Reginald Gant in 3 places at the crime scene. Again, significant on its own to show that Reginald Gant was involved, but it's also corroborated all the other evidence in this case because it comes in independently of any of the witness statements. And I know I sound like a broken record with that stuff at this point, but it's critical. It all builds. 2017 to 2023, the case is inactive. You heard that people cared very deeply about this case. They kept churning it, they kept trying, but unfortunately there just wasn't additional evidence between 2017 to 2023 until there was a break. And in August of 2023, Juwan Follins is basically dragging the police by Geneva by his ear and said, "You need to tell them what you know about this." And he did. He provided details that were never made public. Jamitha didn't know, and the police didn't know either. These details included that Jamie was killed in the kitchen with knives, that the headrests of the vehicle were removed, that Anton was killed in the car, and that he knew that that car fire was related. This all came from Juwan in August of 2023. And now Chief Kruger is interested. Detective Sutphin is interested because there's no way people could have known this without having spoken to someone who was involved. Juwan also related the threats and confessions by the defendant to him. If you tell anybody, the same thing's going to happen to you. September of 2023, Priya and the defendant are arrested and charged. Gant's in federal custody. Again, no evidence as to Chris's status. We just didn't present it, but it's not relevant to your determination with respect to Gregory Robinson. October 18th, 2023, Priya's first proffer interview. You saw everything we've gotten Priya with, basically. You saw the first proffer beginning to end, about 40 minutes of conversation where she just gives a narrative. And there are some inconsistencies with the second interview and her testimony in trial. She explained that. And nobody is excusing what Priya did in this case. She's responsible. She pled guilty consistent with her involvement. This is not an apology for that. But this was also a traumatic night for her in a lot of ways, in different ways than it was for other people involved in this case. But it's still trauma. And she probably has it. She drank. Her lifestyle, I think Juwan mentioned that she was a drug user for a period of time. She pushed this stuff to the back of the brain. That's human nature. That's what you do. It's not like you get up every day and say, "Oh, I need to really think about what happened on October 18th and 19th of 2016. Not an excuse. Absolutely not an excuse, but a possible explanation for the first interview to the second. That's what she said was going on there. November of 2023, she signs her plea agreement, and you saw the plea agreement. We put it into evidence. Her requirement is that she testify truthfully. And December 27th of 2023, she provides additional information. So let's go back to the sources of evidence. Let's talk about Priya a little bit and how we know that her testimony and her information is credible. And to set this up, we talk a lot about physical evidence. A lot of your questions were about fingerprints, blueprints, shoe prints, DNA. We presented everything we have of that stuff to you. But what gets lost in that sometimes is that testimony is evidence. You heard from Lori Freiberger. She works child victim cases, has for 36 years. In those cases, sometimes all you have is the child's explanation as to what happened. And the law in the state of Indiana is that if all you have is a single witness who's uncorroborated by any other evidence, and you believe that witness, if you find that person to be credible, that can be enough to convict someone beyond reasonable doubt. So it gets lost sometimes, but when people come in and raise their right hand and sit down in this chair, everything that comes out of their mouth in response to questions by attorneys is evidence, in the same way that scientific evidence is important. Her details were corroborated. We talked about this as we went through it. Larry Jones, she didn't even know who that guy was. And the police kind of independently ran those phone records back, and he corroborated what she had to say. The phone ping for Reginald Gant corroborates what she has to say, completely independent of her. It takes multiple people to conduct the activities that night. We talked about that. She puts multiple people involved. It would have been real easy for her to say, it was Reggie Gant, all the way through. But she puts other people in, and that fits what happened that night. Anton was a big guy. Jamie Klein was a healthy adult. It would have taken multiple people to move Anton all the places they moved him, and to keep Jamie confined to the kitchen area of the home, because there's no blood elsewhere in the home. It wasn't a running battle between her and the people who attacked her. She describes the scene at Jamie's house, and I asked Detective Kruger, from any place else in the investigation, was there ever anybody who said that Priya Witt knew anything about the Hartsville Roadhouse? And the answer was no. There is no evidence that she had ever in her life been to this Hartsville Roadhouse, but she describes the scene. She describes the floor plan of the house, she describes the stabbing, she describes the kitchen, she indicates that a child was present. Gant's DNA was present, corroborating her, and there was likely at least one other male there. We know that from the shoe print. They tried to track Gant's shoe print back. Now, it could have been a medic, it could have been an officer. That just doesn't move the needle on the case. But there was likely at least one other male there, certainly to control Jamie during the incident. DNA consistent with Gant is located at the scene. Anton's body is found where she describes. She knows where they dumped it. Her car is burned, not anybody else's, hers. She talked to Juwan. She says she talked to Juwan. Juwan, independently of her, comes in and says, yeah, we had that conversation. And the connection between the parties. Again, who do you call to help you with a criminal enterprise? Your brothers. The sequence of the proffer interviews, she got a deal. If you want to be cynical about it, and I know the defense will talk about this, I'm sure, during their closing argument, that she's providing this information selfishly to get some kind of a deal from the state. She got a deal. If you want to be completely cynical about it, if she gave that information to do that, that's fine. But that deal was in November, and after that, she says to his lawyer, I didn't tell him everything. I'm remembering things different. That was her. And there's no way we would have known any of this. Chris's name had never come up anywhere. His name hadn't come up. So, at some point, she turns that corner, and she's providing information when she doesn't have to. She'd have been moving forward on that plea regardless if she initiated that second proffer or not. And that's important. Most of the details she added between the two proffers have no legal significance. And that's what I mean by that. She added Chris. She talked about when Anton was in the trunk versus in the garage. Legally, for the charges, that stuff doesn't matter with him. So why add that stuff if it's not true? And again, this is stuff that the police wouldn't have known if it didn't come from her, but it was important to her to say, no, they moved into the garage, he wasn't in the trunk. Throwing stuff over that guardrail, or Chris going in and forgetting something, going back into the house and grabbing stuff. Those are things that came from her, and they match what we know about the case. Again, no reason to include the defendant and Christopher. She had every option to say Reggie Gann, or Reggie Gann and a couple guys I didn't know. But she gives us people that are consistent with all the other evidence in the case. And she presents her testimony in a credible way. She's got, you spent hour and a half with her in court a couple days ago. You saw her in the proffer. She was more emotional in the proffers, particularly when she talked about Jamie and Alexis. But you ask her a question, you get an answer. There's not a situation where she's sitting there and the wheels are turning. How's this answer going to make me look? How's this going to affect the case? I really need to think about how I present this next piece of information. You ask her a question, she answers that question. And that's important. And she was the same on direct and cross, which is important as well. She's not friendly with me and antagonistic towards, I can't remember which defense attorney cross-examined her. She was consistent all the way through her testimony, so she's not defensive with one side or the other. Maybe that's important, maybe it's not, but I wanted to point it out. The scene and physical evidence, again the DNA, the injuries to the victims, those bodies are a crime scene just like the scenes we saw at Hartsville Road. And again, what can we tell from the scene at Hartsville Road? We went through that with the photographs. There are unaccounted for knives. There are phones that were missing. Jamie's phone was never found or accounted for. There was a search of the residence. Alexis is unarmed. Again, it's one of those details that, yeah, it's part of the case. Maybe we don't need to dig into that, but it's important. She was spared. And you think Reginald Gann, in the mood he was in that night, spending a lot of time killing Jamie Klein brutally. But Alexis isn't her. To Reggie Gann, she's just another witness that night, another potential witness. But she's spared. And what does Priya say? All I could do was protect that kid. I stood in front of the door, I made eye contact with Jamie Klein, mother to mother. Jamie said, my daughter's in the other room, and Priya stood in front of that door. And that's why Alexis is a straight A 14-year-old student at this point, as opposed to in crime scene photographs at night. The burn defende, clearly an attempt to destroy evidence. And Juwan talked about most of this already. The guy's got nothing in this. Nothing. He sat on this stuff for 7 years. Yeah, in a perfect world, he's running immediately to the police after he talks to Priya that night, right? He's picking up the phone. But he's scared of him. And he doesn't want to be involved. That's who he is, sadly. He has details that he couldn't have known if not from someone that was there. He noticed that the headrest was missing and the 2 threats from the defendant that we talked about a few times. All of which brings us full circle back here. And here. Jamie's last words, according to Priya, were, I'm dead, I think I'm dead. And she's dead for no other reason than Reginald Gann and this defendant killed her. He held her. You know the physical evidence. The back was spared from stabbing injuries. He held her so Reginald Gann could stab her. And then he stabbed her himself. He did that. Guy in the blue suit, right here. And he participated in moving Anton Moore so that his family got to see those photographs of him laying in a ditch over the course of the last few days. That's who he was on October 18th and 19th of 2016. And like I said in opening statement, the guy's probably been waiting for the knock on his door for years. And waiting for the time he was going to be in a room like this in front of people like him. And we're there. Through the hard work of the police department and through witnesses who are willing to tell the truth finally. So we ask you to go back and do your jobs. Talk about everything you've seen and heard. Put it together. And at the conclusion of that process, we're confident on behalf of the state of Indiana, on behalf of Anton's family, on behalf of Jamie's family, but mostly on behalf of the incredible, corroborated